I'm writing this from a motel outside Bristol, and there's a laminated card on the nightstand I can't seem to throw away. It came from a cabin, a winter caretaker posting up in the Sable Ridge backcountry, a place called Hollow Fork. 5 rules on it, printed small, edges worn soft from a man's thumb before mine. I've thrown out worse things than this card. Old citations, my wedding ring, eventually. But this stays in my wallet, and every night I read it once before I sleep. I want to be clear about something first. I made it out. I'm not one of the ones who didn't. There was a man before me at that cabin, and he isn't anywhere now. And I think the difference between us is that I read the card, and he decided he knew better. I still won't sleep with a door on my left. I put the bed against the wall now, wherever I stay. So the door is on my right, where I can see it. The motel clerk gave me a room I didn't like, and I paid extra to switch. That's the kind of person this job made me. I'm not asking you to believe any of this. Belief isn't the point. If you ever get offered the Hollow Fork posting, and they will offer it because nobody stays, I want you to have read this first. That's all. Let me go back to the phone call. That's where it started, with a number I didn't recognize and a job that sounded too good to say no to. I'd been 14 years with the Forest Service, most of it front country. Fee booths, campground rounds, telling people to bear bag their food. Good work, boring work, the kind where nobody disappears on your watch. And I'd made that my whole quiet pride. Then the divorce, and the alimony, and a credit line I don't like to think about. So when the district office floated a winter caretaker posting at Hollow Fork, hazard rate plus lodging, 1 season to clear everything I owed, I put my hand up before the meeting was even over. The thing I remember is how relieved everybody looked. Not happy for me. Relieved. Like I'd volunteered to do something they'd all been quietly dreading being asked. My supervisor shook my hand and said, "Congratulations." But his voice did something on the word. Dipped down at the end, the way people do at funerals. Somebody in the back said, "Better you than me?" and laughed, and then stopped laughing. I told myself it was small office weirdness. Every district has its haunted house posting, the cabin with the leaky roof and the bad road, and everyone tells stories to spook the new guy. I'd heard versions of it my whole career. So instead of asking questions, I did math. Alimony, the card, my daughter's tuition I wasn't officially paying, but wanted to. The numbers came out clean. 1 winter, and I'd be square. That was all I let myself see. I signed the paperwork on a Tuesday. They gave me a key, a start date, and directions I'd need because the GPS wouldn't hold up there. Nobody mentioned the man I was replacing. I didn't think to ask. I was too busy being grateful, which is its own kind of stupidity. And I drove up the following week with a truck full of supplies and no idea what I was walking into. The drive up out of Marrow Gap is genuinely beautiful. I'll give it that. Switchbacks through hardwood going gold and rust, the last of the leaves, ridgelines stacked back into blue haze like something painted. I had the window down for a while just to smell it. Cold wood smoke and wet leaf. Cell service died past the second gate. I'd expected that. What I didn't expect was the drive itself. They'd told me 40 minutes from town. I'd clocked the mileage off the district map before I left. and it was a short run, maybe 14 miles of road. But I watched the odometer the way you do on an unfamiliar route. And by the time the cabin came into view, I'd put on a lot more than 14 miles, and a lot more than 40 minutes had passed. Closer to an hour and a half. I blamed the road. That's the honest truth of it. The switchbacks doubled back so hard, you felt like you were driving in place. And I'd stopped twice to move deadfall off the track. Bad map, bad math, bad memory. Roads like that lie to you about distance all the time. That's what I told myself. And I want you to notice that I'm already telling you what I told myself, because that becomes the whole shape of this thing. Me explaining, me finding the reasonable version. The cabin sat in a small, cleared draw, with the tree line close on 3 sides. Solid old log construction, tin roof, a stone chimney, a woodshed off the back. Tidy. Better kept than I'd feared. A truck-worn track led up to a porch with 2 chairs on it. And one window on the north side was boarded over. Not curtained. Boarded from the inside, with rough planks nailed across the frame. Nobody had mentioned that. I sat in the truck a minute looking at it, engine ticking as it cooled. And then a man came out onto the porch and lifted one hand, and I figured I'd ask him about it. The man on the porch was Pell. 60s maybe. Lean the way men get up here, with a face that had spent a lot of winters outdoors. He had a duffel already packed and sitting by the door, and a second bag. And I got the sense he'd been ready to leave for hours, and had only been waiting on me so the cabin wouldn't sit empty a single night. He shook my hand, dry, quick. "Reyes," he said. Not a question. "That's me." "Good. Come on. Daylight." He walked me through the place, fast, and I'll say this for him. Everything practical he told me was exactly right. Wood stove, and how it drew, the damper trick, the flue you had to knock loose when it got cold enough to freeze the plate. The generator out back, the fuel log he kept religious, how much diesel was cached, and how long it'd last if I was careful. The water tank, the tap, the lines. He knew that cabin like his own hands. He never once slowed down, never sat. When I asked about the boarded window, he was already moving past it, and he said, "Leave that." And that was all. At the end, he took a laminated card off a nail by the door, where you'd hang your keys, and he held it out to me. His hand was steady, but he didn't quite look at me while he did it. "Read it every night," he said, "before dark, then again before you sleep." I took it. 5 rules, small print, worn. "Don't improve on it," he said. What's that mean? Means don't get clever. Don't decide a rule's stupid and skip it because nothing happened last time. He picked up his duffel. Man does the job right. He goes home in spring. "You'll be fine." I offered him coffee. It was the polite thing, and the pot was already on. He looked at it, and then at the light going flat and orange in the draw, and he said, "No, I want to be off this mountain before dark." And he went. I stood on the porch and watched his taillights work down the switchbacks until the trees took them. Then it was just me and the wind moving in the tops of the pines, and I went back inside and sat at the kitchen table with the card and actually read it. "I'll be straight with you." I laughed. Rule 1 was about the door after dark. Latch it with the iron hook, not the deadbolt. If something knocks 3 times, evenly spaced. Don't answer and don't speak. If it knocks in your own rhythm, the way you personally knock on a door, check the hook and wait for morning. Rule 2 said, don't draw tap water between midnight and first light. And if the water ran warm in winter, pour it out and log the time. Rule 3 was about seeing a figure at the tree line and not looking at it directly through the glass. Use a reflection. The stovetop, a spoon. Rule 4 was radio protocol. Ask for a duty number that changed every week. Rule 5 said, don't take the lower service road at night. And something about the odometer not being trustworthy. It read like a man's superstitions dressed up as procedure. Old-timer stuff. Every remote posting collects them. Little rituals that make the dark feel manageable. Then I noticed the logbook on the shelf, and the name in it wasn't Pell's. Errol Voss. And there were work boots by the stove, good ones, laced and dry, that were too small to be Pell's and too worn to be new. And the log, when I flipped to the last page, ended in the middle of a sentence. Ink just stopped. I decided Voss had transferred out fast and left his boots and forgot to finish an entry. People leave things. It happens. I filed the card under superstition. I want you to remember that I did that, because I'm not proud of it. My first night, I used the deadbolt, not out of defiance. I just didn't see the point of the iron hook, this crude old thing screwed into the frame at eye level, when there was a perfectly good deadbolt right there. A deadbolt is a better lock. Anyone would tell you that. The hook was the kind of thing you'd latch a barn with. So I turned the deadbolt, and I left the hook hanging loose, and I made myself a plate of whatever I'd brought up that wouldn't spoil. And I sat and listened to the cabin get quiet. It was a good quiet. That's the thing I want to get across. After 14 years of campgrounds, generators, radios, people, the silence up there was the best thing I'd felt in a long while. Wind in the pines, the stove popping, my own coffee, bad the way I like it. No one to answer to until the 0600 radio check. I read a little. I checked the fuel log against what Pell had told me, and it squared. I wrote my first entry under Voss's unfinished one. Just the date, my name, my employee number, weather clear, cold, routine. Nothing knocked. Nothing moved outside. I slept better than I had in months. And I woke to frost on the inside of the window and thought, well, so much for the rules. I want you to hold on to that feeling, because I was holding on to it too. I'd broken Rule 1 on the first night and gotten a full night's sleep and a clear conscience out of it. That's how these things work. They let you win early. They let you get comfortable and clever and sure of yourself. And then they wait for the debt to come due. And up there, the debt always comes due. The first stretch of days I actually loved. There's a rhythm to caretaker work when there's no public around. Radio check at 0600, log it. Walk the near trails, check the markers, note anything down that needed maintenance in spring. The trailheads up there are numbered off the district grid. Fork Trail 9. The Cutbank Spur. The Old Fire Road. Clear the culverts of leaf pack. Run the generator its scheduled hour. Log the diesel. Check the bear bins at the 2 closed campsites, though nothing was camping in November. Radio check at 1800. Log it. Bad coffee. Wet boots. Early dark. I called my daughter once before I lost service coming back up from a supply run to Marrow Gap. It went to voicemail. I didn't leave one. I never know what to say to a machine that's her. I started to feel like myself again, sleeping straight through, eating right, the debt shrinking in my head with every logged day. I even started thinking the posting was a gift. Everybody dreads the empty cabin, and here I was getting paid to sit in the best silence in the state. One night, around the 6th or 7th day, I heard a knock. Just one, soft, and then nothing. I was half asleep, and I told myself it was a branch off the big hemlock that overhung the north side, tapping the wall in the wind. That's a real thing. Branches do that. In the morning I looked, and the nearest branch was a good 8 feet off the wall, and there'd been no wind to speak of. But by then it was daylight, and I had culverts to clear, so I let it go. That was the first one. I know that now. At the time, it was just a branch. It came back 3 nights later, and it wasn't a branch. I was awake this time, sitting up reading by the lamp, close to 11. 3 knocks on the door. Firm, deliberate, evenly spaced. The kind of knock a person makes. Knock, pause, knock, pause, knock. My first thought was Pell. Something wrong, come back up. My second thought was a lost hiker, though it was the wrong season, and the wrong hour, and there was no vehicle I'd heard on the road. Either way, you answer a knock. That's the whole instinct of being a ranger. Somebody's out there, and they need you. So I was up and across the room with my hand on a deadbolt before my brain caught up. And it caught up on a card. 3 times, evenly spaced. Don't answer. Don't speak. I stopped with my fingers on the bolt. I stood there, and I did not say, "Who is it?" Which is the hardest thing, because your whole body wants to. The knock came again, exactly the same. 3, evenly spaced, patient, like whatever it was had all night and knew it. I didn't answer. I backed away from the door, and I sat on the edge of the bunk, and I waited, and eventually it stopped. I didn't sleep. I sat up with the lamp on until the window went gray. At first light, I went out. Fresh snow had fallen in the night, maybe 2 inches, smooth and unbroken, all the way from the porch steps to the tree line. No prints, not mine, not an animal's, nothing. Whatever had stood at my door and knocked 3 times had come and gone across 2 inches of new snow and left it perfect. I stood on the porch a long time. Then I went inside and read the card again, slower. The iron hook was the part I'd dismissed, so that's where I started. I found it screwed into the frame at eye level. Old, hand-forged, the metal gone dark, and pitted with a faint shine on the working edge where 1,000 hands had lifted and dropped it. It was older than the deadbolt. I'd guess it was older than the cabin, moved from some earlier building and rehung, because the wood around it had been patched and re-drilled more than once. I oiled the pivot. It had been kept oiled, I realized. Someone before me had cared for this crude little latch more than they'd cared for anything else in the place. That told me something I didn't want it to tell me. From that night on, I latched the hook. Every night before dark, the way Pell said. It felt foolish, A grown man dropping a barn latch against a deadbolt he trusted more, and it also felt like the only real thing between me and whatever left no prints. I tried to raise Pell on the radio the next morning, off schedule, just to ask him. Just to say, the knocking, is that what the rule's for? The handoff number he'd left me was dead. Disconnected or reassigned, I couldn't tell. Pell had off-boarded and gone wherever retiring rangers go, and I had no way to reach him, and no one else up here to ask. So it was me and the card. That was the arrangement now, and I'd stopped laughing at it. I checked the hook twice before bed, then a third time. Then I made myself stop, because a man can drive himself somewhere bad doing that. And I still had a whole winter to get through. I want to tell you about the knock I do, so the rest makes sense. When I go to my daughter's door, I knock a certain way, shave and a haircut, the first 5 beats, and I leave off the last 2 on purpose, so she has to open the door to finish it. It's a dumb little thing we've done since she was small. It was ours. She hasn't opened a door to me in 2 years, but I still catch myself doing it out of habit on other people's doors, and she'd know it anywhere, and nobody else on this earth would think twice about it. A few nights after I started latching the hook, that's the knock that came. Not 3 even knocks, 5 beats, my 5 beats, that exact broken rhythm, the 2 missing at the end, sitting there in the dark, waiting for someone to finish them. I was already awake. I'd gotten bad at sleeping, and I heard it, and my whole body went cold and wrong, because that knock does not exist outside of me and one girl 300 miles away. And it was on my door, and something out in the dark was using it. The card covered this. If it knocks in your own rhythm, check the hook and wait for morning. So that's what I did. I got up, and I put my hand flat on the door and felt the hook seated in its eye, cold iron, solid. I did not finish the knock. I did not say her name, which is what it wanted, I think, because saying her name into that door felt like the most dangerous thing I could possibly do. I waited for morning. No prints again. But I understood something now that I hadn't. It wasn't just out there. It had been watching me long enough to learn what was mine, and it was patient enough to use it. After the knock that was mine, I stopped sleeping right, and a tired man gets careless. It was maybe 1 in the morning, and I was up anyway. And I was parched the way you get in a cabin, with a wood stove drying all the air. I went to the tap without thinking, filled a cup, cold running water, the sound of it ordinary and good in all that quiet. Except it wasn't cold. The water came out warm, not lukewarm, not room temperature. Warm, like it had come off a heater, in a cabin where the outside air was well below freezing, and the lines ran through an unheated crawlspace. I stood there with the cup in my hand, feeling the wrong warmth of it through the tin. And my brain kept reaching for the explanation. Sun on the tank, except it was 1 in the morning. A heater on the line, except there wasn't one. The card. Don't draw water between midnight and first light. If it runs warm in winter, pour it out. Don't drink. Don't wash your face with it. Log the time. I poured it out. My hand wasn't steady, and it slopped on the boards. I did not drink it. and I did not touch it to my face, and I got the logbook and wrote the time. 1:14, water warm at tap, poured out, exactly like the card said, in handwriting that didn't look like mine. Then I got a bottle of water from the case Pell had stacked under the bunk. There were a lot of bottles under there. More than one man should need for a season, unless drinking the tap at the wrong hour was the kind of thing that got a man killed, and someone had been buying insurance against it for years. In the morning, I checked the tank and the lines in daylight. Ice cold. Every inch of it, the tank, the tap, the crawlspace pipe, cold as the mountain. There was no source for that warmth. There is still no source for it that I can give you. It just ran warm at 1 a.m. once, and I'd have drunk it if not for the card. I needed to understand the water, so I did the thing a ranger does. I went to the source. The cabin's supply came off the creek through an intake screen, gravity-fed down to the tank, with an old well house halfway along the line that Voss and the caretakers before him had used as a pump shelter and a place to store fittings. I hiked up there the next afternoon with a flashlight and a water sample kit, because I still, even then, wanted this to be a water quality problem. Bacteria, minerals, something with a name and a treatment. The creek was clean and cold and completely normal, running low the way they do before hard winter. I sampled it. I checked the intake screen. Nothing. The well house was where I found the second logbook. It was Voss's, a different one from the cabin log, older, water-swollen, tucked up on a shelf above the pump. He'd kept his own private record out here, and most of it was ordinary. Fittings replaced, screen cleaned, dates. But the last third was warm water nights, page after page, same as mine. 12:40, warm. 1:05, warm. Every entry logged clean and careful. And then, near the end, in the same steady hand, one line that wasn't like the others. It's cleaner if you drink it. That's the problem. I read it 4 or 5 times, standing there in a cold well house, with my breath fogging the light. I didn't understand it. I still don't. Not really. And I've decided I don't want to. Cleaner than what? Cleaner how? The problem for who? I put the logbook back exactly where it was. I don't know why I didn't take it. Then I hiked down, and I carried up every last bottle of water from under the bunk and lined them along the wall where I could count them. And I did not touch the tap after dark again. Not once for the rest of the winter. Then the fog came, and it sat on the ridge for 3 days. If you've never worked in real mountain fog, I can tell you it's not the pretty kind. It's a wet, gray nothing that takes your horizon and most of your sound with it. Everything in the cabin went damp. The logbook pages, my boots, the blankets, the matches, so I had to keep a box by the stove to dry them. You lose the tree line. You lose the woodshed at 40 feet. Sound comes to you wrong. Close things, far and far. Things close. So a branch falling a quarter mile off lands like it's on the porch. I did my rounds anyway. That's the job. You clear the culverts in the fog, same as the sun. But I kept close to the cabin, and I found myself back inside earlier each of those 3 days. And I found myself looking at the boarded window. It sat on the north wall, planks nailed across it from the inside. And by now, I'd stopped pretending I wasn't curious. On the second foggy afternoon, I got a bar and pried one corner of the top plank loose, just enough to see through the glass behind it. The window faced the tree line, directly. A clean sight line from that pane, across maybe 30 yards of open ground to where the pines started. That's all it was. A window with a view of the trees that Voss had decided to blind. I stood there with the bar in my hand and the cold coming off the glass. And something about that clean, straight sight line made me not want it open. I nailed the plank back down, harder than I'd pried it, and I didn't fully know why. I knew a little why. I just didn't say it, even to myself. Not yet. On the third evening, the fog thinned, right at dusk, that hour when it lifts off the ground and hangs waist-high before dark takes it. And that's when I saw the figure. It was at the tree line, where the pines started, on the open ground I'd stood, looking at through the boarded window. A figure, standing, facing the cabin. Just standing, tall, dark, still, the shape of a person, but wrong in a way I couldn't pin. Maybe too tall, maybe too straight. The outline not quite settling into anything my eyes could name in that light. Every instinct said, walk to the window and look. Get a clear line on it. Identify what you're seeing, because a ranger who can't identify what's on his ground is no ranger at all. I got 2 steps toward the north window before the card stopped me. Don't look at it directly through the glass. Look at its reflection. The wood stove top was dark and polished from years of use, near enough to a black mirror. I turned my back on the window, which was the hardest physical thing I've ever made my body do, and I looked at the figure in the reflection on the stovetop instead. Small, curved, dim. But there, and in the reflection, it was closer. Not at the tree line, standing well out across the open ground, a good deal nearer the cabin than 30 yards. I looked up at a real window, and through the glass it was at the tree line, far off, where it had been. I looked back down at the stovetop, and in the reflection it stood close. 2 versions of the same thing in the same moment, and one of them was lying, and I could not tell you which. I did not look at it through the glass again. I kept my eyes on the stovetop, and I watched. In the reflection, it kept coming. That's the part I can't make sound sane. Through the glass, whenever I let myself glance up, the figure never moved, still out at the tree line, still and far. But in the stove top, it advanced, slow, steady, closer with each minute, crossing ground it wasn't crossing, until in that dark, curved reflection, it was near enough to the cabin that I could see it had no face I could look at, just a paleness where one should be. The card had a last line for this. If the reflection is closer than the figure, blow out the lamp. I didn't want to. The lamp was the only light, and everything in me wanted light. But I'd stopped arguing with the card by then, so I leaned over the chimney, and I blew it out, and the cabin went full dark, and I stood there in the black, with my heart going, and my hand on the table edge. That's when I heard the breathing. At the boarded window, the north window, the one with the clean sightline to the trees, the one Voss had planked over. Slow breathing, patient, right up against the boards, close enough that I heard the faint, wet catch at the top of each breath. It went on a while. I don't know how long. I didn't move, and I didn't relight the lamp, and I didn't make a sound. Then it stopped, all at once, the way the knocking always stopped. Morning came. No prints, of course, but the top plank over the north window, the one I'd pried and nailed back harder than before, was loose again, pulled partway free. And the nails were bent outward, away from the glass, like something had worked at them from the outside, from the tree-line side, trying to get the window uncovered so it could see in. After the window, I did the thing I'd told myself I wouldn't. I broke protocol, and I called for help. The card said, radio check at 0600 and 1800 only. I'd kept to that. But it was past 9 at night, and I'd found the nails, bent outward, and I wanted a human voice on the other end of something more than anything I'd wanted in years. So I keyed the handset and I called dispatch off schedule, gave my station and my call sign, and I waited for the dead air I expected, because who's manning a backcountry net at 9 at night in the off-season? Someone answered. Go ahead, Hollow Fork. Calm, male, a little tired, like a man on a long shift. He said his name was Vaughn, said he had me, asked what I needed. And for a second, the relief just poured through me, warm and stupid, because there was a person out there. Dispatch was live. I wasn't alone on this mountain, with a thing that bent nails from the wrong side. I actually opened my mouth to tell him everything. Then the card caught up with me. Rule 4. If dispatch answers outside the windows, ask for the current duty number. Pell had left me that piece too. Inside the front cover of the cabin logbook, taped down, a number. It changed every week, he'd written, and the real one would always be there, updated, the way you'd update a combination. I'd thought it was more superstition. Now I was pulling the logbook toward me across the table, with the handset in my other hand, flipping the cover, finding the number taped there in fresh ink that wasn't mine. Hollow Fork to dispatch, I said, and my voice came out steadier than I felt. Confirm your current duty number. There was a pause on the line, just a beat too long. Then Vaughn said, warm as ever, sure thing, and read me a number. The number he read me was wrong. I had the real one under my thumb, taped inside the cover, and it wasn't what he said. What he said was close. It was last week's, I realized, the number that had been there before someone updated it. The way you'd give an old password you'd memorized and never noticed had changed, off by exactly 1 week. Copy that, I said, because I didn't know what else to say, and my hand had gone slick on the handset. Good, Vaughn said. And then, still perfectly reasonable, still that tired, friendly dispatcher voice, he said, let me just confirm you for the log. You're Daniel Reyes, employee number, and he read my number. My real one, correct to the last digit. That's you, isn't it, Dan? Just confirm, and we'll get you some help up there. Rule 4. If the voice gives last week's number, or your own name back, end transmission. Both. It had given me both. I ended transmission, just took my thumb off the key mid-word, his word, confirm, cut clean in half, and set the handset down in its cradle, like it might go off. My hands were shaking now, and I didn't try to stop them. I sat in the quiet cabin and stared at the radio. and the radio hissed with dead squelch, empty air. And then, from the corner of the room, from over by the door, where the handset was not, where nothing was, Vaughn's voice said, without any radio, without the mic, keyed, clear as a man standing there in the dark. "Good night, Dan." I did not turn on more light. I did not answer. I did not look at the corner. I sat exactly where I was, with my hands flat on the table, and I waited for it to be over. And after a while, the room felt like just a room again. But I didn't move from that chair until the window went gray. The next day, I went back through my logs, and that's when it really got into me. Because if that voice could sit on my frequency and read me my own number, then how many of the voices before it had been real? I went through every radio entry I'd made since Pell drove off. The 0600 checks, the 1800 checks, a weather advisory I'd copied down my second week, a voice I'd taken for a relief dispatcher once, friendly, that I hadn't thought twice about. I couldn't tell anymore. That's the truth of it. There was no way to sort the real transmissions from whatever had been mixed in among them. The weather advisory, when I reread it, had named a town for the forecast that wasn't Marrow Gap, wasn't any town on my district map. I'd written it down without noticing, because you don't question a weather report, you just log it. And once, weeks back, I'd have sworn I heard Pell's voice on a channel that should have been dead, just for a moment, saying something I couldn't make out. I'd told myself I imagined it. Now I wasn't sure I had. So I made a rule of my own, on top of the cards. I used the radio only at 0600 and 1800, only for the checks, and I answered nothing else, ever, no matter what voice came through, or how much I wanted it to be real. I stopped trusting the one thing that was supposed to connect me to the world. And I started counting days to spring. I marked them in the log with a little tick in the corner of each page. The debt didn't matter anymore. The money didn't matter. I just wanted to get down off that mountain with myself still intact. And I had a long way to go. By deep winter, I'd made up my mind to quit early. I don't say that lightly. I've never walked off a posting in my life. But between the not sleeping and the knock that was mine and Vaughn's voice in the corner, I'd gotten thin and jumpy, and I knew it. And I'd rather eat the failure than find out what the card didn't cover. The money wasn't worth it. Nothing was worth it. I decided I'd drive out at first light, hand in my key at Marrow Gap, and let them think whatever they wanted about me. I packed the truck that evening, everything I'd brought, plus the last of the bottled water, and I left Voss's boots by the stove where they'd been, because they weren't mine to move. I planned to sleep a few hours and roll at dawn. Then a big weather system came in off the ridge, faster than forecast. And while I was loading the last box, the generator threw its belt. I heard it go, that flat rubber slap, and the charge light died. I had a spare belt, but it was full dark now, and snow was already coming hard and horizontal, and you don't work on a generator by flashlight in a whiteout if you can help it. So I was staying one more night, whether I liked it or not, trapped by a busted belt and a storm, exactly the way these things trap you, small and ordinary and total. I reread the whole card by lamplight to settle myself. Rule 5, the last one, the road. Don't take the lower service road at night. It's longer than it should be. I read it twice and told myself it didn't matter, because I was leaving by daylight up the main road, the way I'd come in, and I'd never have any reason to touch the lower service road at all. The 1800 radio check the next evening was where that fell apart. I'd made it through the night, fixed the belt at first light in knee-deep snow, and I was ready to go. But the storm had dumped harder than anything I'd seen, and I wanted road conditions before I committed the truck to those switchbacks. So at 1800, I keyed the handset for a legitimate check, the real window, and I got a real transmission. I'm fairly sure it was real. It gave the correct duty number without me asking, which the wrong ones never did. The main road was gone. A slide had taken out a whole section below the second gate, they said. Tons of wet snow and mud across the track. Impassable. Crews couldn't get up to clear it for days. The only way down off Hollow Fork was the lower service road. I sat with the handset in my hand for a long moment. The card said, "Don't take the lower service road at night." It was already dark. It gets dark early up there in winter, and the check was at 6. If I waited for morning, I'd be spending another night in that cabin. And I did not think I could spend another night in that cabin, not with what I now knew was outside it, not with Vaughn, maybe waiting in the corner. Between the cabin after dark and the road after dark, I chose the road. I told myself a road is a road. Distance is distance. Whatever the card meant about it being longer than it should be, that was superstition. The same superstition I'd have laughed at months ago. And a long, strange drive was still just a drive. And at the end of it was Marrow Gap and lights and people and out. I got in the truck. I started the engine. And I drove down onto the lower service road with my headlights carving a tunnel through the falling snow. The road was fine at first. Narrow, rough, snow-covered, but a road. I kept it slow, low gear, headlights on the track. And for a while, I let myself believe I'd been right, that it was just a drive. Then I passed the birch. A big one had come down across the ditch on the right, years ago, by the look of it. The trunk split lengthwise, so the pale inner wood showed in a long, jagged wound, very white in the headlights against all that dark and snow. Distinctive. The kind of thing you notice and file away. I noted it and drove on. 20 minutes later, I passed it again. The same birch, same split, same white wound, same angle to the ditch, on the right side again. I hadn't turned around. There was nowhere to turn around. The road was one lane with a bank on one side and a drop on the other. And I'd been driving steadily downhill the whole time. You cannot pass the same fallen tree twice, going one direction down a one-lane road. It is impossible. But there it was. And I checked the odometer, and the mileage had climbed past anything the mountain could hold. More miles than the whole ridge was wide, and still climbing. And I was still going down. Rule 5. If your headlights show the same fallen birch twice, stop the truck, turn off the engine, and wait for daylight. I stopped. I put it in park, right there in the middle of the road, and I turned off the engine. And the headlights died with it, and the dark and the snow came down over the truck all at once. I gripped the wheel with both hands, and I stared straight ahead into nothing. And I waited, exactly like the card said, for a daylight that was hours off, alone in the middle of a road that had folded back on itself. The night in that truck was the longest of my life, and I'd already had some long ones up there. With the engine off, it got cold fast, but the card set off, so off it stayed. I kept my hands on the wheel and my eyes down at the dash, because everything I'd learned that winter had taught me not to look directly at what was outside. And there was something outside. In the last of the fading headlight glow, before it fully died, I'd seen shapes at the edge of the light along the tree line. Still, tall, more than one of them. The same wrong stillness as the figure I'd watched cross the ground in the stovetop. Then the knocking started on the roof of the truck. My rhythm, the 5 beats, the 2 missing at the end, tapped out on the steel over my head, waiting for me to finish it. I didn't. I bit down and kept my eyes on the dash. Rain came on the windshield partway through, and it was warm. I could tell by how it ran, thin and fast instead of freezing, in the middle of a snowstorm in deep winter. Warm rain, warm as the tap at 1 a.m. All of it the same thing now. All the rules pointing back to one thing I never saw whole. I don't know how many hours. I kept my eyes down and my mouth shut and my hands on the wheel, and I did not finish the knock, and I did not look up, and I did not turn the key. Everything the card had taught me, all 5 rules, I ran them all at once in that truck, and I just endured it. The way I'd endured all of it, by being too stubborn and too scared to get clever. Eventually, the sky started to go gray at the edges. When there was real light, I looked up. The birch was gone. No split trunk, no white wound, no fallen tree in the ditch at all. The road ahead of me was ordinary, snow-dusted, plain, dropping away downhill through country I didn't recognize. None of it. Not one landmark from the way I'd come in months before. It just went down, normal and unremarkable, into morning. I turned the key. The engine caught. I drove. It took 6 hours to reach a town. 6 hours. From a cabin that was supposed to be 40 minutes above Marrow Gap, down a service road that should have run maybe a dozen miles. I drove the whole time in daylight, and I never saw the birch again. And I never saw the tree line shapes again. Just endless, plain, descending road. Until it finally leveled out, and there were fences, and a gas station, and a little town. I stopped at the first place, with lights on, a diner, and I sat in a booth and ordered coffee I couldn't drink, and tried to place the town by its name on the window. I couldn't. It wasn't a name I knew, and when I found it later on a map, I couldn't find it at all. Not where I'd been, not anywhere it should have been for the direction I'd driven. Before I went in, I'd sat in the lot and looked at the odometer. I'd written down the reading when I first got the truck, out of habit. A ranger logs everything. And the number that morning was 214 miles higher than it should have been. 214 miles on a truck that hadn't left that mountain since the day I drove it up, until the one morning it carried me down. Weeks later, when I could think straight, I started checking things. That's the ranger in me. You verify. The lower service road off Hollow Fork does not appear on any map I could find. Not the district map, not the topo sheets, not the county roads, not the GIS layer the service uses for everything. There's the main road in, and that's all. The road I drove down for 6 hours, the road with the birch, isn't on paper anywhere. Officially, it doesn't exist, and I came down it. I looked for Errol Voss, the man whose boots are still by that stove, whose logbook stopped mid-sentence. There's no transfer record. He wasn't reassigned anywhere. He's just not in the system after that winter, not as separated, not as retired, not as anything. Gone the way I could have been gone. I looked at Pell, too, the retiring ranger who handed me the card and drove off before dark. His off-board date in the system is from before I ever arrived. On paper, Pell had already left the service weeks before the afternoon he walked me through that cabin. And the card, the 5 rules I'd read every night, exists in no manual, no protocol, no safety document anywhere in the service. Someone made it. Someone kept making it, updating that duty number every week, oiling that hook, stacking that water for years. And it's nowhere official at all. I didn't file a report. What would I write? I didn't tell anyone at work. I took my season's pay, which cleared my debt exactly like they promised, and I kept my mouth shut. And I keep the card in my wallet. And that's the whole of what the paperwork says. Which is nothing, so that's it. That's the whole thing, written down for whoever comes next. I'm not going to explain it to you, because I can't. I don't know what stood at the tree line, or what learned to knock the way I do, or why the water ran warm at 1 in the morning, or who wore Vaughn's voice, or what the road was doing those hours in the dark. I know the rules work. I know that 4 of the 5 things that came for me, I survived by doing exactly what the card said, and nothing clever. I know the 5th thing, the road, the miles, the town I can't find, I don't understand at all. And I've made my peace with never understanding it. Here's the part I'll say plainly. The people who tried to explain it are the ones who aren't anywhere now. Voss with his private logbook and his one line about the water. Whoever came before him. They dug, and they reasoned, and they got clever, and they're gone. I stayed stupid and obedient and scared, and I came home. If they offer you the Hollow Fork winter posting, and they will, because nobody stays, say no. Say it, however you have to. The money is real, and the debt is real, and none of it is worth what's up there in the dark on the wrong side of that door. I've got a hook I installed myself on this motel door. Cheap thing, but iron. I check it twice every night. Then a 3rd time. Then I make myself stop.